Now, in a major development for global energy markets, the United Arab Emirates has announced that it will exit the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, dealing a significant blow to the oil producers whose bloc. The decision, confirmed by UAE's Energy Minister Suhail al-Mazrouei, is being described as a strategic shift aligned with the UAE's long-term energy goals. The exit comes amidst rising tensions in West Asia, with the ongoing Iran war disrupting supply routes, especially through the critical Strait of Hormuz. Despite being OPEC's fourth largest producer, the UAE says now its departure will not significantly impact markets immediately, given existing supply constraints. But for India, the implications could be mixed. As a major oil importer, India could see short-term relief if increased UAE supply pushes prices down. However, if OPEC coordination weakens and producers act independently, it could lead to greater price volatility in the medium term, complicating fuel pricing and economic planning. The move also reflects a larger shift in the global energy landscape, with rising US shale gas production, the push towards renewable energy, and diverging national priorities. OPEC's traditional grip on oil markets has already been under pressure. Now, the UAE's exit signals a move towards a more fragmented and competitive energy order, where no single group fully controls the supply dynamics. From the UAE's perspective, the strategy appears pragmatic, maximizing revenues in the current high demand environment while continuing to invest in diversification and future energy sectors to reduce long-term dependence on oil. With global spare capacity tight and geopolitical risks high, the UAE's decision could have far-reaching implications for oil markets, pricing stability, and global energy power equations. Now we have Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador to the WTO, joining us on the broadcast. Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, always a pleasure talking to you. Tell us your first thoughts on what this means. I'm going to begin by asking a simple, straightforward question. What does it mean for India in terms of its own oil supply?
Buys a lot of oil from OPEC countries as a whole, and also from Russia, since the sanction has been lifted temporarily on Russia. As far as the UAE is concerned, India has a special relationship with the UAE, further strengthened through the FTA with the UAE. So India's oil supply, I don't think, will be affected very much by the UAE's exit from the OPEC. As far as OPEC is concerned, which was set up in 1960, it has had many members walking out, suspending their membership, going back again. So this has been going on for a long time. And there are many countries like Indonesia, for instance, other countries which have suspended their membership, then gone back. So UAE may also rejoin the OPEC at some point of time in future, after things come back to normalcy. And the last point I wanted to mention is that the UAE is apparently miffed with the lack of support in terms of political support and military support from the other GCC countries, primarily Saudi Arabia, in the face of Iranian attacks on the assets which were located in the UAE during the last few weeks. So this could be a way of their expressing their resentment and disappointment with Saudi Arabia in particular, but also Kuwait and the other GCC countries. And that is why it has walked out of OPEC. The last point I wanted to mention is that OPEC was set up by Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Venezuela, the 5 countries. and these still remain. And there are, with UAE's exit from May 1, there would be 5 other countries from Africa. So it could also be a way of showing that the UAE doesn't want itself to associate with Iran in any way at the present juncture.
The other question I want to ask is, will this prompt more divisions within the OPEC? Because it's a clear sign of growing competition among OPEC nations.
I think it would not really lead to a split, because this split is not so much on economic grounds as on political grounds and on the ground of disenchantment and disappointment with mainly Saudi Arabia and Iran. And as far as OPEC is concerned, because the oil supply has gone down, whereas the demand for oil will continue to be stable, if not growing. So the prices would accordingly, they have, I think, crossed 100 after the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And even after the blockade, let's say, gets removed and things come back to normal, supplies will take a few months at least before they go back to their original levels. And that is why the prices will continue to be, the forecast is that prices will continue to be much above the $65, $70 level, which they were at before the war. So with this scenario in place, I think the OPEC would be, perhaps induced or encouraged to increase its production wherever possible, so that stability is brought back to the oil prices and the oil consuming nation's economy. So, having said that, I think this is not going to, the UAE's departure from the OPEC is not going to really matter very much, though the UAE is the fourth largest partner in terms of production of oil in the OPEC.
Fear that that OPEC coordination could weaken and producers could act independently, but you are saying the fact that that's not going to happen. So you're going to say, you're essentially saying that this is going to be an isolated event as far as OPEC is concerned.
I think so, and it is, as I said, it is mainly not guided by economic considerations and pursuit of independent pricing policy by UAE.
Okay.
It is more or less a political gesture, and prices will be governed by the market. So whosoever produces more may not necessarily.
So you don't see a change in the global energy order because of this exit.
No, I think it would not, because UAE is important, but it is not as important as the largest producers, 3 other producers which produce much more oil in the OPEC plus setup. So I don't think really it will make much of a difference.
And do you see India, how do you see India reacting when it comes to its own oil basket? It's been shifting and changing and increasing the sources of procurement. Do you think the quota for UAE could go up, considering that the oil from UAE doesn't have to go through the Strait of Hormuz?
I do think that the UAE oil will have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. Only Oman, I think, is outside the Strait of Hormuz and has access to the Indian Ocean.
But what about Fujairah? From Fujairah, the UAE can export without having to compulsorily go through the Strait of Hormuz.
The problem is that the Iranian missiles can still reach Fujairah, and the Americans are also not allowing anything to come out. So the issue is that once things come back to normal, supplies can resume from the UAE. India has a special relationship. India is buying oil from 40 countries now. It has diversified its supply base considerably. So, whichever country offers it the best price, including transportation, and the shortest possible delivery time, India will opt for those things. And it will, of course, try to hedge its bet so that not all its eggs are put in one basket. So UAE, of course, would be a favored buying destination.
Be a favored destination, but tell us, this clearly this is happening smack in the middle of the war in West Asia, for which we don't know when the end is. Some analysts say if it continues up until the month of June, it could pretty much, destroy all kind of forecasts, economic forecasts for the rest of the year. If it were to continue for at least another month, we really don't know if there's an end to this war that's coming soon. How do you see global oil order realigning itself in this context? If the UAE has gone ahead and made this move in this context, what else do you see happening?
India has already started buying oil from the US, and it could look at other possible sources of supply, but it is already doing it, as I mentioned, from 40 countries. So it would try to buy larger quantities from the amongst the other suppliers. And mind you, this sanction against Russia has been, I think, extended in the 16th of May. It may get further extended, especially if the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz continues and the blockade doesn't get lifted by one side or the other. So our dependence on Russian oil or greater purchases from Russian oil will continue. Now, from an old level of 1.75 million barrels per day, I think it has gone up to 2.3 million barrels or 2.4 million barrels per day in the recent times. So Russian oil purchases will go up because it is a steady supply. US oil will come into the picture. And one of our major oil refiners have already started buying from Venezuela. Of course, there is a problem with Venezuelan oil that its production, of course, has not been streamlined as yet. And not all the refineries in India can process the heavy crude which comes out of Venezuela. One of our largest refineries, or the largest refinery, can process them. So we may end up buying much more oil from Venezuela for that.
Okay, fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Completely out of time here on the conversation. Ambassador Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador to the WTO. Thank you for taking time out to be with us here on News 9.